Hello there my beloved Bessies, and welcome to another episode of Truth Behind the Tale, the series where I take a look at some of our most famous fairy tales and delve into their real world historical and cultural origins. And today we're going to be taking a look at Little Red Riding Hood. The Brothers Grimm released two versions of the story which were retold to them by two different people. The brothers turned the first version into the main body of the story and the second into a sequel of it. It was included under the title Little Red Cap in the first edition of their Children's and Household Tales in 1812. Interestingly, both parts of the story can also be traced back to earlier tales. The first part is practically identical to an earlier version by Charles Perrault, more on that shortly, and the ending is the same as that which is found in The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids. According to this, Red Riding Hood and her grandmother trapped and killed another wolf, the two of them anticipating his moves based on their experience of the previous one that had attacked them. The two conspired to defeat the wolf by luring him down the chimney into a trough filled with water in which he drowned. Similar to some of their other tales such as Rapunzel, the Brothers Grimm revised the story as time went on, and it was soon concluded into the final version which is best known today. In regards to Charles Perrault, who we mentioned earlier, his tale Le Petit Chaperon Rouge is the earliest known printed version and may have had its origins in 17th century French folklore. He included it in the collection Tales and Stories of the Past with Morals, Tales of Mother Goose in 1697. His version was more sinister and moralised than the versions that would later follow, such as the Brothers Grimm. He explained the moral at the end of the story, stating clearly that children should not listen to strangers and warning against rakes, immoral womanising men who might take advantage of their naivete. Interestingly, this version of the story, the presumed original, was written by Perrault for the late 17th century court of King Louis XIV, who probably would have recognised the intended meaning due to the lavish parties they enjoyed with the king. Perrault also introduced the detail of the hood being red. In regards to origins before Perrault's time, versions of the story were told by 10th century French peasants and was recorded by the cathedral schoolmaster Egbert of Liege. In Italy it was also told by peasants, and a number of variants exist there. One of the early tales, the story of Grandmother, possibly has roots in similar stories in East Asia, namely Grand Aunt Tiger, which we'll talk about later. These early versions are different to the one which we know today, but they contain elements which we might recognise, themselves indicative of the time period in which they were told. Instead of a wolf, the villain might be an ogre, a vampire, or a werewolf. This last point is interesting because it may relate to the contemporary trials against people accused of werewolfery. One of the most well-known victims of these werewolf trials was 16th century farmer Peter Stump of Bergberg. He was accused of witchcraft, cannibalism and turning into a werewolf, admitting to killing and eating 14 children, 2 pregnant women and their fetuses. Ooh. He was executed on Halloween 1589 on a breaking wheel. Although these are the earliest stories and possible influences on the tale, Little Red Riding Hood is similar to Cinderella in the sense that many stories from around the world exist which feature similar themes. Tales from ancient Greece and Rome feature motifs like those in the story we know today, especially that the interpretation of the story is a warning about rape or abduction. Scholar Graham Anderson has compared the story to a local legend recounted by the 2nd century Greek traveller Pausanias, in that each year a virgin girl was offered as a sacrifice to a malevolent spirit clad in a wolf skin who raped the girl. The Roman poet Horace also alludes to a tale in which a male child is rescued from the stomach of the female ogress Lamia. In this same vein, Little Red Riding Hood has been compared to the theme of beast bridegrooms which are found in other fairy tales, such as Beauty and the Beast or The Frog Prince. However, unlike the girl transforming these animals into princes, Little Red Riding Hood reveals that she herself has a wild nature, and sometimes the monster should not be saved. Other similar tales are documented from around the world, including Grand Aunt Tiger, which I mentioned earlier. This one hails from 16th century Taiwan and tells of a tiger who comes to a girl's house while her mother is out and pretends to be her aunt. The girl claims that her voice doesn't sound right and that her hands are too coarse, so the tiger tries to disguise herself. When the girl does let her in, she bites off the girl's sister's hand. Obviously, major red flag. So the girl decides to trick the tiger by saying that she's going outside to fetch food, but the tiger ties a rope to her leg so that she can't run away. The girl instead ties her end of the rope to a bucket, and the tiger chases her, so the girl climbs into a tree where she pours boiling hot oil down and kills the tiger. As a side note, the detail of tying a rope around the girl is also found in the earlier versions of the European stories which influenced Perrault, in which she says she needs to leave the wolf's side in order to use the toilet. In another story, the dialogue between the Big Bad Wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, or indeed the tiger and the girl in Grand Aunt Tiger, has its roots in the elder poetic Edda of Norse mythology. After Thor's hammer Mjolnir is stolen by the giant Thrymr, he demanded the goddess Freya as the price for its return. Instead, the gods dressed Thor as a bride and sent him in Freya's place, only for the giants to make comments about how unladylike Thor was in his appearance, eating and drinking. In order to uphold the ruse, Loki gives weak and odd explanations that Freya has been so excited for the impending wedding that she hadn't eaten, slept or drunk in days. Ultimately, Thor regains Mjolnir and strikes down the giants. Staying with Norse mythology for a moment, there are also parallels to Little Red Riding Hood in the form of Skoll and Hati, two wolves who chase the sun and moon respectively across the sky. It is stated in the prose Edda that Skoll will eventually catch the sun goddess Sol and devour her at Ragnarok. Various folklorists have likened Little Red Riding Hood itself to being representation of natural cycles, including solar myths, with her bright red hood representing the sun, which is ultimately swallowed by the night, represented by the wolf. The theme of an eaten innocent being released from the belly of a ravenous wolf is also shown in other fairy tales, including the Russian tale Peter and the Wolf, and as we've discussed earlier in this video, the Grimm story The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids. This motif is often used to link Little Red Riding Hood to being a story of rebirth, with the girl having learned her lesson after foolishly listening to the wolf's lies, now being born again as an adult. It's been interpreted as a puberty rite of passage stemming from prehistoric origins in which girls become women. The general theme of restoration, however, can be traced back to biblical stories such as Jonah and the whale and the life of St. Margaret. In the former, Jonah is saved from drowning by being swallowed by a giant fish, in whose belly he survives for 3 days and nights. God later commands the fish to release Jonah by vomiting him back out. In the case of St. Margaret, she was tortured when she refused to renounce her Christian faith, during which she was swallowed alive by Satan in the form of a dragon. However, the cross she carried irritated the dragon's belly and she escaped unharmed. The story of Little Red Riding Hood has always been a popular one, but its fame has only grown in the 20th century in particular, with various new schools of thought applying hypotheses to its structure and themes. It's been subject to Freudian analysis, deconstruction and feminist critical theory. Its popularity, both as a fairy tale and a thematic work, continues to grow, and it's likely to remain that way for a very long time. It could be said that its themes and morals are as deep and complex as the dark forest in which Little Red Riding Hood finds herself. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Truth Behind the Tale. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single episode. The next episode of Truth Behind the Tale will be coming on the last Tuesday of next month. Thank you for watching, have a good day, and I'll see you all again very soon in another video. Bye!